Hi everyone, and welcome back for more Krautrock records. This is the series where I show my Krautrock record collection, and this is episode 4, From Noi to Popol Vuh. Now, if you don't like long and tedious videos, I suggest you find my video where I flip through my Krautrock records collection, without any comments. But let's start. Let's start off with a monster of a band called Noi. And Noi needs no more introduction, I think, because they sold millions of records, quite to their own surprise. But Noi was a duo founded by Michael Rother and Klaus Dinger. Both had had a short run in the other well-known group Krautrock. And they decided to team up and make another group called Noi. And this is their first album from 1972. Noi, what can we say about them? Noi is in a direction, more in the direction of Can, with groove-based music, sort of drony. Long tracks with little variation, building and building. Excellent stuff. The Noi albums were originally released on the Brain Metronome label, but this is a Grönland repressing, and this is actually on white vinyl. Very high quality repressings done by Grönland or Greenland Records. As I mentioned, to Noi's surprise, they sold quite a bit of their first album and released the year after Noi 2, which continues in the same tradition. Hypnotic beats, droning music, little variation, building up the themes. Simply magnificent. This is also a Greenland repress on white vinyl. Noi released one more album in the original days. I think they have reunited a couple of times. But this is Noi 75, their last album. And here they have added Hans Lampe on Schlagzeug drum kit. And Klaus Dinger and Michael Rother is still with. And Thomas Dinger on Schlagzeug also. An extended lineup. This is also a Greenland repress, although this time on black vinyl. So, highly recommendable, all three records by Noi. Next up we have an obscurity called 9 Days Wonder. 9 Days Wonder released a couple of albums on the classic Bacillus label, and this is their first self-titled album. This is an original, and the originals in Germany, however, were released with rubber foam on the outer sleeve. Sadly, my copy has no rubber foam left. It has been peeled off. Otherwise, the cover is excellent inside, with a nice triple gatefold. 9 Days Wonder was a sort of heavy progressive jazz rock band. I wouldn't say similar to, but somewhat in the direction of some Frank Zappa and Jethro Tull and others. Quite extraordinary band, and this is a marvelous album. The next album as well, which I don't remember the title of, is also an excellent pickup. 9 Days Wonder. Next up we have a heavy hitter in Nosferatu, and this is, I believe, their only album, originally released on Vogue Schallplatten, another label. This is a long hair repressing, which I mentioned earlier. And Nosferatu was a heavy rock band, groovy, excellent Hammond organ, wonderful songs. This is a well-crafted album from 1970, I believe. As I mentioned earlier, the long hair represses are very well done, with custom labels, and of course an insert with the story of the band. Interesting reading. Some pictures, some more pictures. Looks like he's enjoying himself behind the keyboard there. Well, Nosferatu, an excellent pickup. Recommendation from me there. Next one is Novalis, Banished Bridge, their first album. Novalis released a couple of records on the Brain Metronome label. Novalis is excellent prog rock, but nothing too experimental or groundbreaking, just plain good old prog rock. And this is a very melodic and well-crafted album. So if you're into prog rock without any big surprises, Novalis is an excellent choice. This is an enjoyable album, I think. I haven't heard any of Novalis' other albums, but I can certainly recommend this one. Solid throughout. Novalis, Banished Bridge. Next up we have an obscurity, a band called Odin. They released only one album, a hard rock album, and it was released on the German Vertigo Swirl label. And I believe it was released in Germany only. This is an awful Akama repressing, which is the only alternative because the originals with the poster go for crazy money these days. But the poster is included in the Akama reissue. The trouble with Akama is that they are a semi-legit label, or if you like, a bootleg label. They don't always mind paying the artist the royalties for repressing the material. But they're nicely done, however. Next up we have a band, actually not from Germany but from Hungary. It's Omega, but I include them in the Krautrock series anyway because they stationed themselves for many years in Germany and released many of the records on a German label called Bacillus. This is actually a Hungarian original before they moved to Germany on the, what's it called, Pepita label. And this is, I believe, their third or fourth album because they started out in 1967 or 68. And this is a fun release because the cover is made from aluminum foil, so it's hard to find that in near mint condition. But anyway, this is a great sounding psychedelic prog rock band, and they have many records in their discography, many records. This is, I believe, from 1972 or 73. Hello Omega, a solid piece of music there. The next album I have from Omega is simply called Omega, and is an album released in 1973 on the Bacillus label, and they are just solid throughout. Really recommendable progressive rock there. Omega 3, another one from 73, 74. Another one called simply Omega. I think this is a compilation of some of their previous material. And we have one of their best albums, 200 Years After the Last War. This is a solid solid piece of music on the Bellephon Bacillus label. And these are quite easy to find out in the wild and not too heavy priced. The last album from Omega which I have in my collection is The Hall of Floaters in the Sky. A little double meaning there, perhaps, I don't know. And this is a German Decca, no sorry, it's a UK Decca issue. So they were distributed outside of Germany and Hungary, also in the UK. And I think Omega are still going to this day, and they, as I said, have released many records. I'm only familiar with their records up until 1975 and can really recommend you pick and choose any of their 70s, early 70s stuff. Next up we have the wonderful band Organization and their only album Tone Float from about 1970. Tone Float was the band previous to Krautrock. Both Ralf Hütter and Florian Schneider, who later found themselves founding Krautrock, were on this record, together with a bass player and a drummer and a percussionist. And this is far out avant-garde space rock or jam bass rock if you like, and with long songs. Side 1 is only made up of one track, Tone Float, and there are a couple of tracks here. One of them is they actually played the melody Rückzug, which is on the first Kraftwerk album. And this is a magnificent, dreamy piece of psychedelic rock. Whole instrumental, of course. This is a bootleg repressing actually, because this album was originally released on the RCA Victor label, and believe it or not, in the UK. And it didn't go down very well, it sold almost nothing, so to track down original copies of this is almost impossible, and if you find one, the prices are sky high. So there are some counterfeit or bootleg versions about, and most of them sound quite alright. So if you want to check out Organization Tone Float, it's hard to suggest you go out and find a bootleg, but that's sometimes the only alternative, as in this case. So, Organization Tone Float, quite excellent experimental album. An album I showed recently was Out of Focus' first album, called Wake Up, from 1970. And this is a hard rocker. An excellent accomplished raw album. Very well done. And this is on the original Kukuk label, which also is highly collectible for those who are into original pressings. However, this is a repressing from I believe the 80s, because we can see the LC code there, which I mentioned before. A little bit of glare, LC code there, and not on the cover actually. The cover is identical to the original, as well the label art and the album as well, but the LC code gives it away. And that's important to know if you don't want to spend a lot of money and being fooled. So, Wake Up Out of Focus, a really magnificent hard rock album. There are some parts with flute, could be a little reminiscent to Jethro Tull from time to time, but for the most part not. Okay, next up we have a piece of symphonic prog rock from Palmell. And this is their first album from 1972, I believe, called Marburg. And this is a wonderful album. Palmell released a couple of records on the Bacillus label and the Philips label, I believe. This is of course a long hair repress, even though the originals are not too hard to find and not too expensive. Wonderful custom label there. Palmell consisted of highly skilled and trained musicians, and it shows on this album. Wonderful inner sleeve. Perhaps a little bit acquired taste on the vocal side of things. He has a very wide range, and sometimes he sounds almost a bit like a proto heavy vocalist when he goes up in falsettos, but a highly recommendable album if you are into melodic symphonic prog rock. Palmell's next album was called From the New World, and this is also a long hair repressing, but I have managed to get myself an original copy as well. And this was released in two pressings, one with a colored sticker and one with this logo printed into the sleeve in black and white. So this is the first pressing with the colored sticker there. This was released on the Philips label, standard Philips blue label, and it's also a magnificent piece of music, even though I prefer Marburg, their first album, myself. But two highly accomplished albums from Palmell. And don't let the term symphonic rock, prog rock put you off, because this is wonderful stuff. Next up we have a monster of a band which needs no introduction at all. It's of course Popol Vuh, and this is one of two albums only which I have in my collection, sadly enough. But this is Seligspreisung, a wonderful mellow masterpiece. And look at that wonderful gatefold. Florian Fricke, of course, is the mastermind behind Popol Vuh, but Daniel Fischler, which is depicted here, did also do some drumming for Armored Duel 2. He was a key member of Popol Vuh as well, was with them for many years. And I don't know what to say about Popol Vuh, which is not said before, but pioneering in the dreamy, psychedelic space music way. A lot of Eastern influences here and there. Well, it certainly is a masterpiece. The next album I have from Popol Vuh, and the last album I show in this episode, is Popol Vuh Cœur de Ver, which is a soundtrack from a Werner Herzog film, I guess by the same name. But this is perhaps my favorite of all the Popol Vuh albums I've heard. It's on the Egg label. I believe it's a French label, I'm not too sure. but this is a wonderful instrumental piece of music which I highly recommend. So that's what I've got from Popol Vuh. A funny story about Popol Vuh. There was a Norwegian band also called Popol Vuh who released one album in 1972 and then discovered there was a German band called Popol Vuh. So the Norwegian band had to change their name to Popol Ace for their next album. Well, that's a fun fact. So, at the end, I would like to give you my top 5 recommendations, the cream of the crop. And of course, I had to choose Popol Vuh's Cœur de Ver. Wonderful, dreamy instrumental music. This you really have to hear. Of course, I had to pick something by Neu. A really hard pick there because all of their 3 albums are great, but I had to go for their first. Of course, I had to pick Nosferatu, the hard-hitting German band. Really solid album. And as well, 9 Days Wonder. This you really should hear. And really tough decision, but I had to pick Palmell Marburg. But I certainly as well recommend you go and get yourself or at least a copy, or at least listen to Out of Focus Wake Up. Well, that's all for this episode. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.